Hello everybody, welcome. Today is the 26th of January. It's a warm day here in San Francisco. So grateful to have this time, still be capable of walking on legs, breathing with lungs, feeling with hearts, seeing with the spirit of insight together with and for each other. So many of you are aware, whatever you may think of it or make of it, that allegedly, I allege, me, that I had a long, complex experience with an NHI complex. This is my placeholder word for what I actually think is something like the star that generates minds. This is not an entity. It doesn't have an ontological status at all, because ontologies are what happen in human minds as a result of its behavior. So it's not a thing. It's not a being. It is the superior that lies above the possibility of lexicons as an embedded intelligence array, at least in time-space, and most likely in what is generating time-space. Now, I'm going to go deep here, so strap in. I'm going to do something I don't usually do. Now, I have a bookmark, which is the nature of the intelligence of human children, and I'm going to get to that. But before I do, I want to present a perspective that someone must have had. Ancient people almost certainly had various degrees of awareness about this. However, they were probably extremely careful about encoding it in concepts, because they were aware that once you represent something in concepts, conceptually, linguistically, you're in danger of losing it. Right? You're in very serious danger of losing it into trivial relation with the representation you forged. This is part of why in many religions there are severe admonitions against forming images. They were intimately, viscerally aware that this was dangerous. This was not an intellectual concern. They were like, there are certain things you must not do, or you will lose the spirit of being. Right? You will sacrifice local signal access and coherence futurially, and you will relate trivially with the representations. This would be like kissing a photograph of your mom every morning and having no relationship with your actual mom, not even realizing she exists. This is the danger of representational cognition. Now, representational cognition is not in itself bad. But when local signal coherence, signal from origin, spirit, intelligence, being, breaks down, starts to shatter, the primary evidence of that in human societies is a profusion of representations. Does that sound familiar to you? Right? You wouldn't be seeing like an explosive profusion of images and texts and pictures and things that have nothing to do with being or being alive, would you? Surely the internet has not become this, right? 1 billion images per second. And the unimaginable reproductive fury of those images, those representations. What are they representations of? Stuff that isn't there, right? Stuff that is missing in our experience. Yeah. So they were very concerned about this, and they knew better than to trust language, right? i.e., that man is my enemy, right? That's language. Over relationship, i.e., we are together here. What may become of this? Let's explore. Right? That's different from that man is my enemy, yeah? Or those people are my enemy. So they were very aware of this, and there are many ancient stories that orbit this particular concern of taking the conceptual identity as primary and ignoring the possibility space and the relational space around it. Now, briefly, before I get started, because I do think it's a related topic, I'm going to mention an insight that I've been aware of for a long time. And before I do that, I'm just going to say something very simple. During my experience, I was shown directly, as if I were present at these historical events, vast ranges of the histories of timespace, living worlds, our world, the development of human cognition, where things went wrong, how the signal coherence broke down here, what the responses of various intelligences were to that problem, and may yet become to that problem. And primarily, when I speak of my experience, there are a number of features I never speak of. They're simply too dangerous to talk openly about in a public space. And they are dangerous because they violate our expectations about how things are, quote, supposed to be, unquote. Or even what is, quote, good, unquote, and what is not. And some of these revelations were so dangerous that I realized fairly early on that I must never speak of them. Or at the very least, be exceptionally careful about doing so. There are primordial situations that are so different from what the humans believe, think, tell each other, and experience, that if you were to suggest these perspectives, a couple things would happen for sure. The first is that some groups of humans would hunt you down. And there has been some minor activity in this regard. And they will hunt you down for lots of different reasons, but the simplest reason is that the templates of knowing, believing, and seeing, calling things, naming them, that we are imprinted with are aggressively and combatively, like militarily, protective of their sovereignty over the minds of humans. And if you bring forth anything that will violate that sovereignty, they will send avatars to take you out. Not in every case, in many cases, in most cases. And the more public or popular these quote-unquote forbidden ideas, right, become, the more likely of an outcome like that. So the first problem is that it will generate something like assassins. Right? The second problem, though, is much weirder. Very, very few people will allow these insights into their awareness for the same reason that it violates the templates they're imprinted with. And so most of the important things will not reach the common audience. Occasionally someone may come across it who's capable of understanding it or wishes to. But if ordinary people took some of these things seriously, it has the potential to shatter their mind. Because their mind is structured like a web of these little templates they've been imprinted with through the processes of enlanguaging and enculturation. And that web has a kind of coherence, and even though it's blinding and in many ways cruel, and it amputates most of our faculties, these templates, that coherence still matters. You shouldn't just come to humans with something that will rip them a new mind, and deliver this without preparing them carefully, or giving them buffers where they are vulnerable, and lubrication where they are insight oriented. This is why people go mad when they're exposed to metaphysical things. Not everyone does. And these things are not merely metaphysical. These things are transconceptual. They come from the before of concepts. That's a space your mind is capable of navigating in. We are not trained to do this, though there are certain branches of human behavior, music, math, art, all of the arts, right, in which the before of the verbal and the physical and the conceptual mind is accessible, and we can play in that space relatively openly without too much concern for damage. So there are many things I've never spoken of, or I have spoken of them only very indirectly or tangentially on purpose. And there are some things that I will certainly never speak of publicly. I'm trying to think if there are any things that I would refuse to speak of privately in a conversation where I trusted that we had, somewhat like a skiff, right? Where I trusted that we had the capacity to communicate openly as human beings without being surveilled or recorded. I'm not sure that capacity actually exists. It probably does. But I'm going to talk about two things today that are fairly controversial, though I'm going to stay in the orbits that aren't as controversial as they might become.
This way you get to see your kids. And they'll...
So the first topic, before I get to what's going on with human children, is this branch of the UFO UAP topic where we hear things that imply that at least some of these beings have something that we call a hybridization project. And the humans are likely to suppose that something that's almost I'm quite sure it's not possible, but nearly everyone supposes it. Even if they have religious beliefs, they're unlikely to reject the concept of evolution entirely. So the humans tend to think, here we are on Earth, separate from everything in the universe, superior to everything in the universe, because of our conceptual thought properties. Right? That's what makes us superior. And we can make machines. You better be careful. If you question our superiority, we'll send bombs. Right. And we evolved here. The universe is just a big mechanical accident. Happened to accidentally produce humans here. So we are sovereign unto ourselves. We are self-created, or, evolution created us, invented us, engineered us, and so forth. And all of this happens separate from time-space and separate from all other intelligences in time-space or of time-space. And so we're just the standing anomaly of incredible superiority. Homo sapiens, right? We know that we know. There is literally zero possibility that could be true. None whatsoever. This supposition that the universe is a big machine, accidentally producing minds and beings as a side effect of its mechanical structure, is one of the dumbest and most unlikely ideas ever to arise in the human mind. So we've heard that There may be, quote, hybridization programs. Right? Well, I'd like to invert that whole perspective dramatically, fiercely. Not trying to tell you what's true, trying to show you a perspective that I think and hope you may find useful, enlightening, or insightful. So now you got a bunch of people really angry. Oh my God, they're stealing us. They're doing things with our bodies in spaceships, and they're hybridizing us. It's terrible. Well, first of all, the humans are doing that to you all day long. They're doing it to your children all day long, right? Poisons in the food, glyphosate, forever chemicals, hormone and endocrine changing chemistry, stuff that screws up our hormones, right? The corporations and the military prison industrial complex see the common person as a lab rat, and they're going to do anything they want to make money or get power or build more weapons or whatever, make more prisons, you name it. So first of all, if you want to be upset about something, you should be upset about what the humans are doing, because they are definitely not intelligent, and they don't give a flying fuck about you, your children, anything. Nothing. They don't care if the world lives. In fact, they probably prefer it didn't. There's certainly some faction that imagines snuffing most of the human population, or just putting them in prison camps, and then living in vast, luxurious bunkers inside mountains, under the earth, whatever. They will snuff the human population, and they don't care. Right? They're not human. Right? So you have something that's more alien, probably, than any alien could ever be, quote unquote, actively assassinating the history and future of life on Earth. You want to be afraid of something, you should be afraid of that. Right? That will snuff your planet, right? If it's allowed to proceed. But I want to show you a lens where something entirely different is going on, where humans were engineered as something resembling an interface between the non-physical aspects. Oh, wow. Yeah. Get a load of that signal. Yeah, that's some coherent signal right there. You can trust that. So, in this lens, the humans were purposefully engineered over time, not merely genetically, spiritually, biorelationally, environmentally, as an interface that bridges the non-physical and the physical in a being capable of sustaining that bridge over time. Yeah? And so we are not a naturally evolved species in this toy's light. We never were. We're protecting something that never existed. We think we're trying to protect something that never existed. Separate human societies, which, by the way, are about as dangerous as you can possibly imagine. The only thing that's as dangerous as that would be like landing on the sun unprotected or something, right? It's just pure danger in fake human societal form. So in this view, however, these transcentient minds, or more than merely minds, we don't have language for a lot of this stuff, so I have to kind of make things up. I have to make up ideas and words. But the beings that dwell in the non-physical layers of the Dandelion, which generate time-space, there are beings among them, or you might call them societal minds, right? There are multi-minds, transcendentally intelligent, that live in the Dandelion, and they would like access to the physical layer because they can affect processes in the non-physical layer by transforming the physical layer. This isn't exactly a technology, but it sort of resembles one. And so in this toy, these beings are engineering time-space. They are hybridizing time-space itself, not merely humans, right? They're actively engaged in the hybridization of time-space with these non-physical layers of transcendental, right? It's not even intelligence, it's transcentience, right? It's intelligence that lives above time, and that kind of intelligence is nothing like what humans usually play with. Although they do import features, technologies, and insights from those layers in the realms of math and computation and biology and so forth, even art. So in this view, it's not the humans who are being hybridized, it's time-space itself and all that it produces. Right? I want you to imagine intelligence is capable of organizing time-space so that it remains coherent. And it becomes possible to have living worlds in time-space where you can have physical beings. Right? And you can interact with and relate with those beings. You can participate in physical reality through them, not exactly virtually, and we in turn can participate with their minds, again, not exactly virtually, with these intelligences, these origin beings. And I just want you to imagine a situation that resembles this. I'm not trying to tell you what to believe or think, but what the humans think is backwards, inside out, upside down, 90% broken, can't be true. The things we tell our children are so absurd that they're much worse than anything we tell them about religion. By evicting intelligence, being in participation, spirit, origin, play, creativity, wonder, awe, by evicting all that stuff and regularizing and fossilizing the remains of it, we get the present state of representational cognition in our species, which is a clusterfuck of imminent apocalypses. So there's nothing as dangerous as that, certainly not around here. Granted, the few exceptions, like the sun goes nova or a giant rock smacks into the earth. But the humans are building 50 giant rocks that will smack into the earth in short order that are made of machines, right? So what's the dangerous thing? It's not rocks in space. Your probability of encountering that fairly low, depending on the time span. Your probability of encountering apocalypse from human activity, extremely high in the short term. So this idea that aliens are demonic or they're just bad beings, there might be some disoriented factions among the intelligences in origin, but nothing as disoriented as us. Yeah. You can't get as disoriented as us. The field's too coherent to allow it. Machines decohere our field here, the field of living beings, the hyperstructures of minds and biologies and relationships that give rise to the incredible diversity of the biosphere and its urgent priorities, of which the humans are primarily completely unaware. Yeah. Have no idea about the priorities of the Earth, no idea about the priorities of the sun, time, space, origin, any of that. They got some religions, and they got a lot of corporations, and they have some really effective military cohorts. Because apparently everything in the world is trying to kill you, so you better just make guns. Never mind that I have zero experience of that in my entire life and have rarely even seen a fist fight, right? But in films I've seen millions of guns and probably thousands of people killed in film. So I want you to imagine a universe that is being actively, intelligently hybridized, and what it's being hybridized with are the transcendental aspects and intelligences of origin. The non-physical layers of the sphere that I call the Dandelion, whose core is unimaginable profusion of insight, intelligence, love, awareness, unity, compassion, virtue. So that's one of my bookmarks, right? I don't think we're being hybridized, and I'm not afraid of what aliens might do with or around humans. I'm absolutely bone terror about the humans. I suspect that most of the other stuff is pretty intelligent. Nature looks pretty intelligent to me overall. Yeah, the humans can defect. And they can cause the defection of other beings, and then they go around saying like, well, as beings kill each other and stuff, so we're just doing what nature does. No, it's probably your effect on those beings. Your proximity to them changes their mind space. Yeah. The Cogniscia of Earth, the dimensions of relation and intelligence and synergized symbiosis, those things are delicate, and as you tear the environments down and introduce trillions of machines, you're damaging the possibility space of minds in relation on this planet in a way that is very difficult to recover from, especially as that process proceeds and accelerates. So that's my first bookmark. Hope you might find something about that interesting. I certainly do. It had never really occurred to me this clearly before that the entire physical layer of time-space is not a construct in the way that we imagine. It's not a machine. It's a transcendental form, one of whose sub-features is beings. So there's something more than a being. There's something more than an entity. There are these field intelligences that are profound beyond the possibility of imagining. You have to just encounter them, touch minds with them, yeah? Have a direct experience of your own mind in contact with that form of insight awareness, infinity. And I'm not recommending that you go out and try to do that. That's an extremely dangerous thing for a single lone human to attempt. Very likely to go sideways all kinds of different ways, which is why I don't, someone asked me the other day, why don't you just connect people to these intelligences that you speak of? And originally, of course, in my naivete, I thought, yes, of course, this is what we will do. We will give the humans back the ability to produce local signal coherence. I quickly realized that was an extremely dangerous idea, because what you need are coherent human groups first that can support this kind of endeavor the same way a vast human group is necessary to support a space flight. You know? So without those intelligent human cohorts, this is a recipe for disaster. It won't fly. It would probably fly in some cases, but the downside would be too significant. People would go nuts. There is an exception. And the exception is young people, and particularly children, because having not yet been imprinted with the vast library of lethally stupid templates that the humans rely upon in the representational layer of existence that they've established and are enslaved by and sustain, if you've not been imprinted with that yet, it's not very dangerous for you to step outside of it psychologically or emotionally. In fact, it's often the opposite. It's very medicinal for children, young people. Also, some very elderly people, right? They're on the edge of, their life experience in the template, prison, and they might be interested in getting a taste of something beyond that, enough to actually listen and work with the possibility space openly and intelligently and curiously, in which case things will generally go well. I'm going to sit some meditation, and then I will return with part 2. What's going on with the human children? Boy, are you going to be surprised by this. Stay with me. Okay, let's try this again. Had some technical difficulties last time. My I'm afraid my phone apparatus, my headset mic is pretty old. Yeah, my mind is so much calmer. And after meditation, it can be a bit challenging to vocalize at all. I just feel very quiet and calm inside. Got an escort from my Stellar's J friend who likes to sit with me when I meditate and sometimes sings the most incredible secret J songs. What a blissful experience that is. So I'm going to try to talk in a very simple way about something that was a part of my experience. And even though I was aware that human children are profoundly intelligent and that most of the systems we subject them to do not educate them, they de-educate them. What they do is they imprint them with a bunch of conceptual and quote-unquote rational and or logical templates about what they're going to have to do to survive in the human representational nightmare. And children get somewhat excited about this, but also despise it. No one wants to have faculties amputated. Yeah? And this is a lot of what happens in at least our educational systems here in the no longer United States. So the children are faced with a bunch of crises, but I have very good reason to not merely suspect. I don't suspect that peaches have the flavor I taste when I eat them. Nor do I believe that peaches have the flavor that I taste. It's not a matter of belief. It's not a matter of confidence, right? It's not a matter of proof. It is non-conceptual. Right? I experience the flavor, and in the same way I experience this flavor, I directly experience the transcentience of human children. Almost universally. I don't get to have long hangouts with kids, but when I do get a chance to communicate with a young person, almost invariably they will signal that they have transcendent assets and that the adults aren't paying attention and they don't know what to do. In other words, they are in a crisis. That they cannot articulate, and they have no idea why this would be the case. So human children are particularly adaptive. They can be born into any human culture. Apparently they can even adapt to non-human cultures. If you're going to get born in space-time, right, there's no guarantee of a stable or coherent environment. There's no guarantee of a stable or coherent biorelational situation. So the children are extremely capable of adapting to whatever they may encounter when they exit the womb, and before that too. What they're not very well equipped to encounter is a world filled with poisons and machines, and with humans whose minds are essentially dead inside because they've been recruited to representational, to really deleterious forms of representational cognition and behavior. Money, war, education, the list goes on. So I like to suggest, even though for me it's not a suggestion, it's my direct experience of children, I have had conversations with children that were more transentiently intelligent than any conversation I've ever had with an adult. And I cannot explain to you, in terms you would understand, what it was the children were attempting to point at with their speech and their behavior. But I can say that encountering a human child in the right developmental phase, and if they recognize that there's a being that's partially transcendent with them, they will attempt to do the old thing, right? They will attempt to establish local signal coherence and to demonstrate that they are aware of features of existence that the adults cannot detect and have no conception of. And they've looked, yeah, it's going to get worse than this, a lot worse. So we moderns, we have this word telepathy. This word by itself is deceptive. This is not what's going on. It's not that mind A sends a signal, which mind B then reads, and then reiterates to mind A. There's some agreement of some kind, and they both decide, oh, we were transferring thoughts to one another. That is not what's going on. That idea comes from technologies like radio, telegraphy, telephones, and so forth. It has nothing to do with what's going on in nature, though there are some forms of signaling that don't begin at pure unity and can be transmitted and received. However, even that is still the wrong idea. That's not what's going on. What's going on is that there are these fields of intelligence that I call Cogniscia, and the human children are in touch with fields that have nothing to do with humans and are so much more than intelligent that human intelligence looks trivial compared to what they are, become, and do together. And the children are born immersed with these intelligences, and it appears that some of these intelligences follow the children into the birth situation and remain with them throughout early life. And so we think, the adults think, oh, the children have imaginary friends, how cute. No, the problem is the adults don't have minds, and that's not cute. The adults are playing around with little Lego toys in conception that break the signal coherence locally so that they cannot detect what is in their own children and attempting to contact them from their children. The one thing human children expect when they're born is that their parents, like them, are still transcendent. In other words, they can participate directly in each other's minds, memory, thought, experience, concern, purpose, celebration, fear, all these things immediately, instantaneously over the entire field of a human mind, not in little bursts of spoken nonsense. Yeah, it makes no sense to the children why the adults are emitting face noises in place of actual communication. And for the children, this is as bad a crisis as being born among tigers. The children are born expecting transcendent parents, expecting mind sharing, not mere telepathy, expecting to be able to dream together, learn together, and see together instantaneously, moment to moment, in all situations. Whether there is temporal or physical distance makes no difference at all. In fact, it can enhance signal quality. And the human children are born into these potentials. They brought them with them into incarnation, and none of the adults around them can sense this. There are examples of this in human thought, literature, films. The most obvious, simple example that comes to mind immediately is the example of the little boy in the film The Shining. Child is getting signals that are transcendent. Nobody understands this, not his parents, not anyone. The one African man in the film who has not lost the transcendent skill calls this the shining. To shine within. with the mutual space of all minds and all beings in all of time as an array of intelligences that do not belong to you, but are native to your form and way of being. So I want you to imagine with me, and I am actually saying this very clearly. I am telling you, in this case, I'm not trying to make a toy or a lens. I'm telling you, it is my direct experience that the human children are transcendent, and the adults will do everything in their power to shut that down. Most of them. Exceptions noted. Various branches and cohorts of humans, various lineages of humans have concerned some partial knowledge about this, and they usually think of it as supernatural, which is absurd. Because there's nothing supernatural about it. What it is super to is not nature, it's super to the expectation spaces enforced on human minds by the ridiculous templates with which we are imprinted and which we will subserve, obey, authorize, and defect from our humanity into at nearly every common social opportunity. Again, notable exceptions noted. So what I want you to understand is that the human children are born into an incredible crisis. The one thing they would never expect is that the majority of the survival assets, the lineage assets, conserved for human beings across billions of human births are missing when they arrive on Earth. The most important, crucial things are missing. And this is a puzzle the children cannot solve. It's a total disaster. The intelligences that come with them into birth attempt to guide them in this bizarre situation where they are born transcendent and their adults, their parents, are not only not transcendent, they're mostly not intelligent. They can relate fairly effectively with representational situations and conceptual ideas. These have nothing to do with being alive. Nothing. They're the opposite of life in nearly every situation. The reason that we have these bizarre representational modes available is because under circumstances where the network has broken down, right? There's no available intelligence in the network. Now you have to solve things with little algorithms and such, particularly if you're in a representational context, you're not in a natural context. In a natural context, you will reawaken transcentience or you will die. Yeah? Only in a representational context can representational intelligence be a benefit really much at all. So the children are born into this bizarre crisis where they are transcendent, more than merely telepathic. They could probably perform miracles if there was any support for these intelligences they bring. In fact, not probably. They can perform miracles all day long. They're performing miracles by acquiring representational cognition, which they quickly realize they're going to have to do the default mode thing. And what is the default mode thing? Well, in the absence of coherent signal intelligence among the cohorts of adults they find themselves born to, then they will default to learning the systems that dominate the situation where they are embodied. No one should be subjected to that. That is absolute torment. The two features, right, transcentience and representational cognition, can live harmoniously together without the latter destroying the former in a situation where the transcendent assets prevail. Yeah, they're not lost. They are preserved, they are celebrated, recognized, adored. But our children are born into an almost explicitly opposite situation where all of those features are denied. People have been murdered for even suggesting they exist. And I don't mean like one or two people, I mean millions of people have been murdered just for suggesting there's anything other than the ordinary stuff. So there's nothing supernatural about this. Nature is filled with fields of intelligence and minds that are accessible to human beings. These are the water our minds were meant to swim in, and it's been replaced with a bunch of fucking tokens. Right? Little concepts. Oh, that's a tree. You get wood from it. It's not a being. It's not your friend. There's no mind in there. You can't contact it. It's just a fucking, it's a plant machine, essentially. That anyone could believe that for a moment should be the most suspicious thing on our planet. Yeah? There's zero possibility of that being true. So the children then enter a sort of emergency mode, right, where they must successfully undergo uptake of representational cognition. And this is so demanding metabolically and energetically that it co-opts the assets with which the children would ordinarily transduce signals in the Cogniscia, in the network of mind spaces that is not merely physical, but on Earth is incredibly complex in its physicality due to the astonishing diversity of life forms on our world and how they synergize. These life forms form relational hyperstructures, and these are part of the infrastructure of the Cogniscia of Earth. The children are absolutely tuned into this when they're born. I've had children explain this to me and show me that they're trying to show their parents, they're trying to wake up the assets in their parents, and they're hitting a bank vault, right? The dominance of RepCog in their parents is so militaristically protected that it cannot be penetrated even by the soul of a child, even by the soul of one's own child. And this is a fundamental trauma for every human being. We all undergo this. Zero people discuss it. There are rare exceptions. There was I think a psychologist who spoke of the experiences of children, that they remember their development in the womb, and that it's a crisis for them that we don't acknowledge or support these memories. Can't recall his name. He was introduced to me by George Gorman, a friend of mine, brilliant, amazing friend of mine. Yeah, so this is a big secret on our world. We think our children are not intelligent yet, and they're just waiting to be imprinted with the nonsense that will destroy their mind. That's how we roll. Now, in recent times, via the telepathy tapes and Lidu and her mother and many other children are learning how to see without their eyes. What do you think are the assets they're using to do that? Because every single one of us believes that if you don't have eyes, you can't see. Right? There's no yes, no, maybe. There's just simply no eyes, no seeing. Right? This is what we think. This is not the case. In fact, I would suggest that our vision, what we think of as the result of having eyes, is actually not accomplished by our eyes at all. And if the Cogniscia were not present on Earth, we would not be able to see even if we had eyes, because we would not be able to engage in the integration over the space of visual stimuli that produces the very strange, exotic, and I think transcendent experience of ocular vision. Also, it should be obvious that we can see without eyes because when our eyes are closed, we see what we dream. Nonetheless, watch the human adults go batshit insane attempting to deny that mindsight is possible or blindsight is possible. They can watch it happen right in front of them with actual children who, not being imprinted with what is supposed to be impossible, do not find it impossible and can simply do it. Right? So this is the kind of thing I'm talking about. These non-speaking children, many of them very peculiar in how they are embodied, can easily demonstrate abilities that all conceptually imprinted adults will presume are not possible, therefore this must be a grift, right? This must be like a magician's trick. The child has just learned a trick, that's all. They don't really see, even though they've got 5 blindfolds on and they're reading a book that's in another room. You know, that can't be happening. It's just a magician's trick. They scripted the child and they filmed it. It's, you know, it's the... Yeah, they just don't believe it. And this is what I mean. If your expectation space is so defensive that it won't allow anything that violates its sovereignty in your evaluations, you simply won't experience what's right there happening in front of you. This is what happens with our children. We're told these things aren't possible. We don't believe that the children could be vastly more intelligent than the civilizations into which they're born, which is obviously the fact. But you know, yeah, it's a grift, bruh. Stop with the woo. It's a bunch of tinfoil hat nonsense. Yeah, of course it is. It isn't that these abilities in our children are supernatural. Rather, our ways of thinking about existence are subnatural. That's the fucking problem, right? We are thinking of nature as so much less than what nature is, that anything that violates our expectation space gets, you know, tagged with a derogatory, usually, tag of, oh, it's supernatural, it's metaphysical. Yeah. All right. This was not the way the ancients thought at all. They thought the other way around, right? Nature generates the sub-natures that we experience. And all of the experiences are nature, and the sub-natures can become opposed to nature, especially with representational cognition dominating the mind space. So you have these nonverbal children who are capable of miraculous feats of knowing what their parents are thinking, doing, where they've hidden food in the house. They can demonstrate this all day long, no problem. Nearly all of modern humanity does not believe in it. They just simply refuse. They don't care if there's evidence. It violates the expectation templates they've been imprinted with, so they declare that it's nonsense, or even attack it, you know, crusades, right? Kill all those witches. They're everywhere, burn them up. Yeah, those are the daughters of Satan. Right. If Satan looks like anything, it looks like Repcog gone batshit out of its mind and trying to kill anything that violates its sovereignty in human cognition. So one of the things that occurred to me last night, which I found extremely surprising, was that the very young children are not fully embodied yet, right? And this process of becoming embodied, maybe not fully, but mostly, goes on throughout our lifetimes. And each one of us is uniquely both embodied and disembodied at the same time. So that the assets that we might think of as belonging to the transcendental Cogniscia, the beings of origin, the intelligences that watch over and engineer time, space, minds, bodies, ecologies, everything, or are involved in that process. They may not, ecologies are not necessarily a pure construct of these intelligences. And so it occurred to me that we are all probably partly disembodied. And some of these children are so uniquely disembodied that they can't acquire the representational templates that would obliterate their transcentience, and so they remain transcentient but non-speaking. Yeah? So they're not fully embodying. Or they're not embodying as completely as most of us do. Yet all of us are incompletely fully embodied. And dreaming is the experience of this, right? There's a whole continuum of degrees of not fully embodied that occur during dreaming. And we transit that continuum through the dreaming cycles uniquely in our own ways according to our recent situations, histories of dreaming, health, relational integrity, and so forth. So this idea was very surprising to me and had never occurred to me this way before. That what we think of as non-ordinary assets have to do with methods of partially disembodying, and there are a vast array of intelligent methods like this. And the children who are non-speakers or tablet spellers and so forth that demonstrate these abilities are actually trying to show us what we are made of. They're not trying to show us, oh, hey, we're really special, you're not. They're trying to show us, just like our own human children, what the actual situation is and what the opportunity space looks like, and what we're ignoring to the great detriment of all human beings and life on Earth, in an attempt to rescue us, right? Which would be the primary goal of any child born, until it discovers that it's in a bizarre science fiction story where the transcendent assets are being overtly attacked and destroyed, amputated, and replaced with fucking tokens, little pictures and shit, texts, AI, cars, bombs, right? Little packets of ketchup. Yeah. So the children are born absolutely messianic. All of us were born this way. What we discovered on birth was that most of the asset set we bring is despised here, and you better keep quiet about it, or we will burn you down. Yeah, you better keep quiet, right? You think about Amon Hillman. Like, this has a lot to do with Amon's peculiar revelations. Yeah? And this goes very deep, this topic. I'm going to stay away from some of the more dangerous things here, but it should be obvious that this magical, transcendental aspect in the children causes adults to attempt in various ways to contact or recover or, get an experience of that somehow. And many of these ways are the result of the problem of making the child's transcentience taboo to begin with. Right? Because we are all children. And the segregation of the ages produces a bunch of developmental and bizarre, how to put this, traps, right? But throughout history, what I'm talking about the children right now was absolutely known by the ancient Greeks and others. The children were not necessarily, the topic's too dangerous to pursue openly. The children are filled with the spirit of origin, and it has not yet been amputated. That is naturally attractive to animals, to plants, to living places, because the children are more like them. So they have this shining, they have this power. And some branches of the adults want to capture that power and deploy it as a weapon, or as an asset. And this is tragic and terrifying and wrong. So there's a lot more to this topic, but I've managed to cover the crucial roots here today. I feel pretty good about that. Could do a lot better under other circumstances, but I'm making the best of what's at hand. All of us are still children. We have all of the ages of us within us. These assets belong to us. They are our inheritance, not just by being human, but by being alive at all, by being a being. Yeah? And we can resurrect these assets together, even though it's much harder for adults than it is for children. And I want to be really clear about this. I've had conversations that were very complex with extremely young human children. Pablo was 18 months old and had a vocabulary of about 7 words. And that child was able to show me that it was aware that I could see. It was aware and personally knew, was familiar with the NHI complex that was at that time my companion, and hopefully still is. It knew my birthday. It communicated my birthday to me using the name of their best friend who had the same birthday. Yeah. Pointed at me and said this name. The children have assets that would obliterate the entire history of science, physics, and religion. They're made of them. You are too. We must recover these and protect them in our children. This whole no, let's imprint them with the fucking monetary system and, sit them in front of dead machines for 8 to 10 hours a day, having light burned into their memory. Light images, like the opposite of dreaming. This has to stop. I mean, we could do any other thing and we'd be better off. So these are some of my thoughts for today. I hope to explore this topic in greater depth as time goes on. I'm grateful to the children and the mothers, the living places, the beings of origin, the non-human intelligences that are our own family, just the way my mother and father are my family. So much gratitude, adoration, humility. Please take a moment, like, comment, subscribe, support the channel in whatever way feels natural to you. I wish you beauty, liberation, insight, amazing adventures, beautiful roles, wise dreams, and the fulfillment of the promise of your human incarnation this time around. I look forward to learning together again very soon. Bye-bye for now.